man was marooned on a desert island for a long time. And then the rescue party finally found that little deserted island, and they went ashore, and they found the man, and the man was there with 3 dwellings or buildings, 3 huts on the island. And the leader of the rescue party said, What are those for? And the man said, well, first one there, that's my house. What's the second one? Well, that's my church. What's the third one? Oh, that's the church I used to go to. And people switch churches for all sorts of reasons. Some are good, some aren't. Someone once called the process that's particularly prevalent in our country the circulation of the saints. And the reality is that many churches, including mega churches, are really not making new disciples of Jesus Christ. Rather, they're attracting the disaffected members of other churches. But, you know, that's really the history of Christianity as a whole. Despite the fact that Jesus prayed for unity among His followers in that portion from John's Gospel we just read, division has been the dominant mathematical practice of the church over the years. And very early in my ministry, I heard the reason, and I saw the effect that it had in the tiny Shelby County, Indiana town of Fairland. Now, Fairland was so small, didn't have a traffic light, but they were proud of the fact they had 2 4-way stop signs. Seems that years ago, the Fairland Christian Church and the Fairland Methodist Church were right across the street from each other. And they shared in a vacation Bible school every summer for the children of the community in the surrounding area. And it was great. And then one year it all blew apart. You know what it blew up over? The Lord's Prayer. Whether they should teach the children to say, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, or forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And wasn't that a great reason to stop ministering to children? Why can't Christians get along? Now, it may be helpful to remember that in the early church, there was no central authority, no established doctrine, very little organization at all. Fellowships of followers of the way, which is what it was called at the time, developed in many cities, especially after the folks who'd been converted on the day of Pentecost. We heard about them just last week in Jerusalem. They went home, and legend has it that some of the apostles ended up going as far as France and India to spread the gospel. So the church is growing, and there's really no one person in charge. Each church was pretty much on its own to figure out this life of faith together thing. So it's no great surprise that differences developed and disputes arose. Even in Jerusalem. In the 6th chapter of Acts, we find the account of a discussion in the church when the Greek speakers felt they were being discriminated against by the Aramaic-speaking followers of Jesus and fellow believers. So they had to get that worked out. The Apostle Paul planted churches everywhere he stopped on his missionary journeys, but he regularly, if you read his letters, he regularly had to deal with divisions and disputes. And as our scripture lesson from Ephesians points out, Paul kept reminding them that the church it's one body with one faith and one Lord, and body parts can't be cut off from each other and continue to live. Christianity's understanding of its ministry is to be a unified community of believers serving God's will of unifying the whole world under the lordship of Jesus Christ. So what happened? Well, a little more history. In 312 AD, Constantine was a Roman general. He may have been influenced by his mother Helena, who some scholars believe secretly was a Christian, but just before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge against the competing general Maxentius, Constantine reported seeing a cross of light above the sun with the Greek words, "In this sign, conquer." So he ordered his troops to paint that symbol, which we call the Chi Rho, on their shields. And then he went into battle. And they won. And he became the emperor of the Roman Empire. And in 313 AD, he issued the Edict of Milan, which granted official tolerance of all religions, including Christianity. Constantine then became patron of the early Christian church. He supported the church financially, had an extraordinary number of basilicas built. He granted privileges, such as exemption from certain taxes to clergy, promoted Christians to high-ranking offices, returned property confiscated during the Great Persecution under Emperor Diocletian, and he endowed the church with land and other wealth. Between 324 and 330, Constantine built a new imperial capital, which would be named Constantinople for him. Unlike old Rome, Constantinople began to employ overtly Christian architecture, contained churches within the city walls, had no pre-existing temples from other pagan religions. And Constantine even exempted soldiers who were Christian from drilling and duty on Sunday. Those of you that ever served in the military, you think that might have had an effect on encouraging conversions. But like all good emperors, Constantine valued order and consistency. And the fractious nature of the church probably irked him. I'll bet it drove him nuts. Some scholars credit him with influencing the gathering of church leaders in a place called Nicaea in 325 AD. And those church leaders sought to determine the difference between truth and heresy, between true teaching of the faith and false teaching of the faith. And they developed what we now know as the Nicene Creed. It's the oldest of the Christian creeds. And you can find that in our hymnal. From time to time we use it in worship. But whenever groups define their beliefs and practices and their values, there are often those that say, we don't share those beliefs and practices and values. So they break away to form their own groups. And that happened. It was true for the church way back then, just as it's true for the church today. Still, things were relatively smooth. They were unified unified by 1000 AD. Most Christians were united under the bishops in the major cities, along with 5 patriarchs who exercised leadership over collections of bishops in a region. And the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, was the first among the patriarchs. But by 1054 AD, the difference between the Greek-speaking eastern part of the church and the Latin-speaking western part of the church resulted in a formal split. And yes, money and politics played a part in it. That's undeniable, since the Roman Empire also divided along the same way. But it was more complex than that. And from this we get had the division between the Catholic and the Orthodox Christian traditions. Both claim to be the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. And of course, when you make that claim that you're the one, that means the other is not. By the 16th century, the Western Roman Catholicism faced divisions during the Protestant Reformation, led by guys by the name like Martin Luther and John Calvin and others, over the authority of the Pope, corruption in the Catholic Church, whether the Bible should be translated into languages people actually spoke and read, and other issues. And in Europe, most nations had an official or established church. Wars among the nations of Europe and the kingdoms there were often characterized as holy wars for the one true faith, which of course was their faith. By the 17th century, those countries realized that that had not been a good thing. In fact, it had done a lot of harm. And so they allowed different churches to worship and to function in the same country. So we've got different understandings, traditions of the faith, and that's where we get the concept of denominations. And they took advantage of this freedom. By the 19th century, the denominations in Europe and in North America began to send missionaries abroad. And surprise, surprise, they took their denominational approaches with them. And they planted them in other parts of the world. And the Methodists in America in the 19th century split over racism. That's where the African Methodist Episcopal Church and the African Methodist Episcopal Church of Zion got their birth, because unfortunately some of our Methodist ancestors were racists. It split over slavery. Split over the power of bishops. Split over whether the church was becoming too liberal. Wasn't holy enough. And then Unitarianism and Mormonism developed in America, rejecting the doctrines of the Trinity while still asserting that they're Christian, or at least associated with Christianity. So here we are in 2017. Even now, the United Methodist Church is struggling with whether and how it can remain united. Dividing principally over issues relating to human sexuality, but there are others involved too. There are four characteristics that do unite, yet also divide Christianity. The first is the incarnation. Ironically, this has contributed to division, because incarnation means flesh and blood at a time and a place. The intention of God in taking on human flesh in Jesus was not to make everyone an Aramaic-speaking Jew in order to be saved. As Christianity spread across the world in different cultures and contexts, it shouldn't surprise us that it took on different forms in different places. Different flesh and blood in times and places. And the second thing that unites, yet ironically also divides, is community. Christianity is not a solo sport. It's not an independent study. We do it with others. A community requires leadership, it requires structure, and if you've lived in different communities, you know there are differences among them. They'll have different leadership, different structure. Third is the role of Scripture. Now, everyone pretty much agrees that the Scriptures are inspired by God, but what is Scripture? What's in? What's out? How is Scripture to be understood and interpreted? Literally? Metaphorically? Historically? All of the above? And in the relationship with secular authority. I remember we talked about the established churches that were in many nations and kingdoms in Europe. For centuries, the church had a very close relationship with the political leaders of the empires and kingdoms where they were located. And then the pendulum swung. And it still swings back and forth between the church seeking to have a stronger relationship with the government, and the government seeking to have a stronger relationship with the church, and then the church saying, we're not so sure this is a good idea. The government saying, we're not so sure this is a good idea. We've seen it. We've seen it. It's important that we understand the differences between us. But we need to work harder to not let those differences divide us to the point of conflict or putting down the others not being really Christians. See, as long as we do that to each other, our witness for Christ suffers. And Satan is loving it. He doesn't have to be all that active because we're doing it for him. One of the speakers at our annual conference said that on any given Sunday in the United States, only 17% of the people, only 17% of the people are in a church, a synagogue, a temple, or a mosque. 17%. That tells me there's a lot of work for us to do for the cause of Christ. And if we keep beating each other up instead of beating up on the devil, that number's only going to go down. I learned of a church that reminds itself and lets its entire community know we're a church, we're folks that will lift you up, and we won't tear you down. That sounds like a pretty good thing for us to keep reminding ourselves and then putting into practice. Not tearing each other up, tearing each other down, but rather lifting each other up. You know, I have to think that if we did that, if we did just that, with all of the amazing quilt that makes up Christianity, the effect would be incredible. We don't have to put down, Lee was just telling me she has a son on a mission trip. But then she said, sorry, but he's a Baptist. Don't be sorry. I'm glad he's a Baptist. Okay? If we stop putting down the other churches and God chooses to bless them over us, who's winning? Jesus. Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? Is putting Jesus first? Because that was, it was Jesus' prayer. Let them be one. As you and I, Heavenly Father, are one. It's Jesus' prayer. It's God's will. I pray we'll make it our ministry. I invite you to stand if you're able, and we're going to close our service as we sing.